get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're excited to be partnering today with the Sydney Better Buildings Partnership to bring you today's webinar. I'm Nicole Sullivan, Impact Director at thinkstep-anz. I'll be your host today and we'll introduce our exciting list of speakers as we go. But before we get started, let's pause. thinkstep-anz and the Better Buildings Partnership recognise the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present and recognise their continuous connection to lands, skies and waters. So to begin with, I'd like to introduce Simon. He's the Associate Director Sustainability for Colliers, and he's been really instrumental in helping to guide this project with us. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. So who are the Better Buildings Partnership, or BBP? The Better Buildings Partnership was established in 2011 by the City of Sydney and represent more than half of the city's CBD commercial office space. They are a collaboration of leading property owners, managers, and industry influencers, providing green leadership and sustainable innovation for Sydney's commercial and public buildings. The BBP has a track record of delivering real impact for over 10 years, and it does this by providing practical tools and guides on climate action, resilience, and circular economy. So the BBP has been working on waste since its inception. We have developed best practice operation waste guidelines that has informed Neighbours Waste, as well as GECA certification of waste contractors. The circular fit-outs toolkit for offices builds on the strip out waste guidelines and a green leasing toolkit that the BBP have also developed. The BBP's circular procurement best practice guideline has been created by industry for industry. We know that organizations are increasingly leveraging their procurement power to achieve greater sustainability outcomes. To seize these new opportunities and to be competitive in the tender processes, suppliers of goods and services throughout the supply chain need to understand how to meet their sustainability expectations. To support this ambition, the BBP engaged thinkstep-anz to develop the Circular Economy Procurement Best Practice Guideline, further equipping the sector to push towards more circular procurement approaches and processes.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'd now like to introduce Jim Goddin. He's our Head of Circular Economy at thinkstep-anz and has been really instrumental in the creation of this in collaboration with industry. So Jim, I'll hand over to you if you'd like to take the screen share and go forward from there.
Fantastic. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
We can. Thank you very much.
So I'm Jim Goddin, Head of Circular Economy at thinkstep, and it's been my great pleasure to be involved in this project, which has been a fantastic team effort. So what I'm going to do quickly in this session is I'll take you through what the guide is, so what the scope of the project was, why circular procurement matters, and an introduction to the contents of the guide that you'll see when you download it. So just briefly, an introduction to the project. So the purpose of the project was to develop a circular procurement best practice guideline to be published on the BBP website, which it has been, and for that to be available to everyone to use to further equip the sector to push towards circular procurement approaches and processes. And this is a particular challenge because it's a very broad area, and it's been very important to us as we've progressed through this project to have that great engagement with industry as part of this process. So we're now at part B, the webinar presentation, which is where we get to pitch to you the guide itself and to show you a bit of what's inside it. So the purpose of the document, as I said, is to assist property owners, managers, and various other stakeholders who are included in the procurement of goods and services to really understand how to integrate circular economy principles in their procurement. The scope of the guideline is very specific. So whilst circular procurement should be considered at every stage, from design and construction through to maintenance, repair, and decommissioning, we've been particularly focused on the fit-out operations and maintenance and repair end, so not including the design and construction. However, there are a variety of other resources that we do link to, which you can see there on screen, which do cover those other phases, and also a degree of overlap with this guide, which we've again linked to within the document. So this guide isn't to be taken in isolation. It's a framework and a guideline that will hopefully point you in the right direction to other resources and give you more information about where to find additional support and guidance. So what does the best practice within this document actually look like? What does getting to a best practice for circular procurement actually entail? And if we distill it down, really what we're looking at is defining a clear circular economy goal for your business and aligning that with your strategy. So what are you trying to achieve through the implementation of circular economy? And how does that align with your overall business strategy? Engaging with internal teams early and often. One of the challenges we tend to find is the sense of ownership over delivering circular economy initiatives. So understanding where individuals within your team can either help or support or influence circular procurement is part of that. Focusing on the whole life performance, so not just upfront cost and carbon, but on how you can take decisions that have a longer term effect and may be beneficial over a longer time frame, because we're looking at reusing, remanufacturing, and procuring goods that may be more durable or maybe on an access-based model. But we need to understand how that maps out over a longer time period. Collaborating with suppliers to innovate, so bringing those suppliers in and enabling them to deliver goods and services in different ways. And part of that is giving them permission and having that dialogue over what the expectations are, so they can really innovate around the delivery of those goods and services. Measurement obviously is an area close to my heart. So understanding how to benchmark your current performance and then to track your progress as you progress through implementing circular procurement using verifiable metrics and certifications. And then most importantly, adopting that mindset of continuous improvement. We're not going to get to 100% circular system overnight, but what we need to do is identify those early wins and to continuously improve and iterate. And again, bringing in those metrics and feedback from our stakeholders, both upstream and downstream. So very briefly, in terms of what the circular economy is, I'm sure most of you know quite a lot of detail what the circular economy is. The circular economy is a systemic approach that maintains the circular flow of resources, recovering and retaining and adding to their value while contributing to sustainable development. So those are the three principles that are enshrined. There are actually a variety of other principles that you can find published in standards like ISO 59004, but this is a snapshot of what the circular economy is actually trying to do. We can also look at the principles of circular procurement through two different lenses. So we can look at demand-led strategies. So these are things that aim to reduce the quantity of material we need to be able to deliver the services that we're trying to deliver. So that includes designing out waste and slowing the loop. So extending the lifespan of products through things like durable products, reuse, remanufacturing, because if we can keep our products in service for longer, we need fewer of them overall. We also need to look at supply-led strategies. So these are strategies that aim to recover materials that can be used again. So these are your strategies like recycling and composting, which would aim to keep those materials flowing at the highest value through things like recycling. So we can then decouple from requiring to produce more material to begin with. So why does the circular economy matter? Typically, it's not circularity that we're trying to deliver per se. It's usually the economic, social, environmental benefits that arise as a result of circularity. And the economic benefits include direct benefits, so through retention and recovery of economic value in products and materials, but it can also be through continued access and minimizing exposure to things like price volatility, which we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment, and we have done in the past and will do again. Social benefits, obviously, through things like job creation, creating new businesses around repairing and remanufacturing and hiring products, producing greater social equity by making access to resources more affordable. And obviously the environmental benefits, of reducing carbon emissions, water stress, biodiversity loss, and the general management of natural resources. So why is circular economy important for procurement? So embedding circularity principles makes good business sense. It's the reason why it is the circular economy. The economic aspect behind circularity is what's really carried the concept of circularity so far over the last 10, 15 years. So through that, we're looking to reduce product lifecycle costs for the business, to de-risk the supply chain, as I mentioned, to enhance our corporate reputation. So that makes our business more compelling and gains us with brand loyalty is what we're looking at through there. It helps us to gain access to things like green financing and investment, and increasingly there are funds that are looking specifically at circularity and sustainability as part of their investment criteria. helps us to build stronger relationships with our stakeholders, both upstream and downstream, and helps us to meet emerging standards and regulations. Now, through the circular economy, there is also the opportunity to create new business models, to sell our products and services in different ways, and to deliver environmental and social benefits. Now, it's important to note that circularity doesn't always lead to environmental and social benefits. There are systems in which circularity doesn't deliver those. So we need to look at specifically how those metrics overlap and how we're leveraging circularity to deliver those environmental, social, and economic benefits for our business and for our supply chain. So as an overview of the guideline itself, the guideline is intended for a very broad range of stakeholders. And some of those stakeholders are obvious. The things like procurement teams should have a strong role in procurement. But one of the things that really emerged as we went through the consultations of this guide is just how broad the stakeholder group is in the procurement process. So understanding that and bringing those roles into the procurement process and making sure they understand what circular procurement means is an important aspect of this. So it is intended for quite a broad audience. The guidelines should help you to understand how to build a business case for circular procurement. It should give you a broad overview of the circular strategies such as durability, reuse, refurbishment. It'll give you practical insights into navigating circular procurement, and it also includes a number of case studies on how BBP members are implementing circular procurement already. I'm not going to go through this slide in a lot of detail. There's a lot of text here, but the guideline contents include the introduction, obviously, an introduction to some strategies for circular economy built around the 10R framework, how to implement circular procurement, how to embed it in your procurement projects, some useful resources, a glossary, which is important when we're going into this space, and importantly, a checklist at the end, which is really a usable guide to how to access different parts of this document and how to link to other resources as you're going through the process of implementing circular procurement within your business. So we wanted this to be a really living document, not just something you read and put down, but something you can refer to and actively use again and again. And that checklist is really the ideal entry point to that, because it will point to you to the questions you need to be asking yourself and the resources that help you answer those questions. So I said section 2 really focuses on circular strategies, and this is built around the 10R framework, sometimes called the 9R framework because it does go to R9. But there are, if you count them, 10 different strategies there. This is also known as the circular economy hierarchy. So at the top, we have the most preferable routes, refuse, rethink, reduce, and then we use to reuse, repair, refurbish, and so on, till we get to energy recovery. So within the guideline, there's a brief description of each of these strategies and how it links to procurement strategies and the outcomes we're looking for. It includes metrics for how we measure the success of these strategies, and how those strategies then align with ESG objectives of your business. So it's making those links out to those other metrics and the sort of things you need to be aware of and look for as you're implementing these types of circular strategies. It includes measures of success, and obviously there are some metrics that we can readily point to. We also, which you see here on screen, there are also various international metrics that are gaining adoption, particularly through standards like ISO 59020. We have the material circularity indicator, the circular transition indicators, which are already pointed to by the GBCA. So we have a range of metrics that we can assess and that you can use depending on which circular economy approaches you adopt and how those then influence or link to your business strategy. Section 3 talks about implementing circular procurement. So how we establish the case for change within our business. Why should you be pursuing circular economy in the first place? How does it help you to deliver your business objectives? How you link with stakeholders within your business? How you optimize your solutions? How you collaborate with your value chain, and that's important because circular business models can be quite disruptive. So how do we bring them along for the journey and ensure that they also benefit from this procurement process? How do we then manage procurement, balancing our needs and our priorities so that we optimize the circularity we achieve? How do we then measure and assess circularity and the performance of the system that we're implementing? And how do we manage things like trade-offs between different metrics such as environmental, social, economic. goals. In section 4, we move on to how we embed circularity in procurement projects. And again, this is a process which starts from a strategy. What are we trying to achieve as a business through our procurement process? How do we implement that into the planning? How do we run pilot projects, for example, and assess the feasibility of different circular initiatives? How do we build circularity into our tendering process and our evaluation process in a way where we can compare potentially very different solutions? So this is one of the challenges that circularity metrics tends to address is, how do we compare a durability-based system with a reuse or remanufacturing system, or a recycling-based system, or an H-based system? So we provide guidance on how to do that and link out to the established metrics that help support that type of evaluation. Through the implementation process, as a project is running, we talk about how to continue to engage with stakeholders and to continue to iterate and evaluate the overall benefit of your initiative, and at the end to evaluate your project as part of a retrospective, as part of that continuous improvement process, to identify new opportunities to improve in the future. As I said, at the end there is a checklist that is a really important entry point to this guide, and you'll see there are a number of different objectives with actions associated with each, and each of those links through to different sections of this report, this guideline, and from there to other resources that will help you to really understand the context of how you implement circular procurement, the types of metrics you're looking to measure, the types of environmental, social, and economic benefits you're trying to influence, and how that then maps into your supply chain, and how it benefits internal and external stakeholders. So just finishing up, again, where you can find the guideline, we have the web link there on page and a QR code you can scan. So if you go through to the Better Buildings Partnership website under resources, you'll see the circular procurement best practice guidelines linked there, and you can download that for free. So yeah, hope you have a great read of that. Again, looking forward to receiving feedback as you get stuck in. Nicole.
Thanks very much, Jim. I'm just waiting for my video to work. There we go. I think the screen share is working. That guideline is fascinating, and I think it's just such a practical tool to actually be able to really get started and to just start where you're at and really move forward. Our next presenter is Harriet. Thanks for jumping on video, Harriet. Harriet is Program Lead Responsible Products and Materials at the GBCA, and we're excited to be able to share the GBCA link with you today. Harriet, please grab the screen as you're ready. We really want to encourage people to understand how all of these guides actually link together and work together. And so thanks very much. Over to you, Harriet.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm lucky to be part of the BBP, and it was around the end of last year that we were all discussing what was missing in the circular economy space. And it was all about how can we provide more guidance to the built environment to assist with the how with circular procurement. So the BBP were very keen to create some guidance, and so were the GBCA. So we really wanted to make sure that we were collaborating to make sure that we weren't duplicating the existing work that's already out there in the market, but also each other's work. So it's been very much a collaborative effort to ensure that there's great alignment, and as Jim has mentioned, to make sure that the guides are really complementing one another. So as Jim just spoke to, the BBP Circular Procurement Best Practice Guidelines includes all types of procurement, but it's specifically after occupancy. And the GBCA's practical guide to circular procurement is specifically for new buildings and major refurbishments, but it's looking at the whole of the building's life cycles from planning to end of use and decommissioning. But the thing that really binds the two together is the how. So in terms of what I'll be speaking to briefly today is really the core of the guidelines. So the beginning, we introduced briefly to the circular economy fundamentals and procurement concepts for those that are not familiar, but also encouraging people to skip straight to the juicy part of the guidelines themselves, which is this middle section here, which how are each of the circular strategies implemented at each of the building's life cycle stages, and then how can project teams start to include the wording, specific clauses for briefs and contracts to ensure that circularity is delivered. And then finally, I'll be speaking to a case study that really goes to show the great work that's already out there in terms of circular procurement. So the guide itself is available on our website under the reports and publications page, and I can post a link to that later. This here is an example of one of the stages, what we like to call a stage to a page. So this really is a tool for project teams to be able to pick up and go, okay, well, if I'm at the planning stage of a building, what are the things that I need to be focusing on? So we've got on the left-hand side, the stakeholders. These are the key decision makers. As a lot of us know, the key to circularity and circular procurement is involving as many stakeholders as possible and throughout that journey. So these are just the key decision makers at this stage. Then the circularity strategies that can be implemented, and then the overall objective of that stage, as well as some core tasks and deliverables before progressing on to the next stage. There'll be links, that anything that's underlined throughout the guide, links to the appendix where there's additional guidance for if as a project team, you're wanting to complete a circularity audit, what's involved with that. And then throughout the guide, you'll also see little text boxes, little pop-ups. These are additional things that project teams can also be considering when they're at that stage. This here, again, is the really exciting part of the guideline, which the brief language and contract language that is really just serving as guidance for project teams. So if you wanting to undertake or conduct a circularity audit, what are the specifics that you need to include in the brief and also in the contract to ensure that that is being delivered? And then again, on the left-hand side, you can see another example of a pop-up box that's available, and you'll see that the BBP guide is also one of those boxes. And then this is my favorite case study of the guide. This is a buildings as a material bank example that's been executed in South Australia. And it's really wonderful to have this case study in here because it really goes to show the challenges that this team they're working with in terms of circularity, which is the fact that implementing a material bank at the beginning, it's really hard to see those benefits until 30, 40 years down the track when those buildings are ready to be decommissioned. So some really wonderful case studies in there as well. That's everything from me. We will post a link to the guide, and if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Harriet. It's just been such a pleasure and privilege to be able to partner with the GBCA and make sure that these guides really speak to each other really effectively, and we're very grateful for their collaboration. Next, we have Melinda Mandler. She's a National Sustainability Manager at JLL and here to share their Sustainable Procurement Guideline from Sydney. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. Thank you to both the BBP and thinkstep for the opportunity to discuss JLL's Sydney Office Procurement Guide and a little bit of our journey. So as some background, as part of our move to our beautiful new office, we targeted a 6-star Green Star Interiors version 1.3 rating for those who like technicalities, and a WELL Platinum rating to verifiably confirm our commitment to sustainable and healthy spaces. So these high sustainability aspirations demonstrate our dedication to environmental leadership and employee wellbeing, and we have achieved both those ratings since. So as part of the development of our Sustainable Procurement Guideline, the consulting team were initially engaged to put together this particular guide. Its intention was to be used in conjunction with our global ESG and procurement policy, but it's also underpinning our environmental focus areas. So we're looking at climate action for sustainable real estate, healthy spaces for all people, and inclusive places for thriving communities. This guide was put together specifically just to be tailored for our Sydney office and take in the local environment, but also incorporated feedback from various of our internal team members. The purpose of this guide, as well as being utilised as part of our certification process, is also to encourage staff to ask critical questions when making purchases. So really just starting with the why are we making purchases in the first place? Can we reuse? Can we refurbish, recondition? Are there existing products? Are there components we can extend its life on? Can we implement things like demand management? So, reducing paper, something that we probably as sustainability people take for granted. Can we reduce our paper consumption? Can we set our printers to default double-sided printing? Can we instigate drawdown technology or swipe codes and pin codes for retrieving our printer jobs? Really, really simple things like that. Can products be better shared amongst multiple users? Can we hire instead of buy? Really having the team come together and ask those critical questions throughout the design process. If it was determined that we did indeed need to buy new items, what is that impact over the life cycle of that particular product? So what is the product made of? Is it being imported? Are there transport impacts? What are the sustainable and environmental standards during raw material extractions? What are the impacts of its use? So, when procuring a dishwasher, what are the energy and water consumption impacts going to be? Is there a life expectancy of a product that may be better on the market? What are the capital maintenance and life cycle costs? Will the product emit VOCs? We were asking a lot of questions of everyone in the room to really help inform the decisions that we were making of each of the materials going into this space. So the impacts of this guide, we all speak fluent sustainability and fluent alphabet soup in sustainability. So we really wanted to simplify down that language for non-experts. Everyone in the room is, an expert in their own field. We have designers, we have operations people, we have project managers, workplace people. Not everyone who's speaking sustainability as their everyday language. So this guide needed to be utilized by the initial team members who are not speaking sustainability every day. So it needs to be in day-to-day procurement language. It really hammered home the importance of contracts and confirming that there's stewardship arrangements, where are the contracts, where can they be found, are we able to utilize those, and the ability for the team to be able to then refer back to that should the time arise. It's a really valuable resource for the operations team. Some of the representatives who work in our corporate real estate team were not here during the design phase. So they're able to then go back, look at the procurement history, utilize this guide when they're making decisions moving forward in the operation of the space. So some of the key benefits. So it is aligning procurement with our global sustainability goals. It was promoting environmentally friendly product choices. It's supported in achieving some of our certifications, but then coupling that with our O&M manuals, our as-built FF&E schedules and the like, we were able to have a really full comprehensive documentation pack that allows the operational staff to go back and then really understand the design incentives, especially if there's no one around from any of those initial decision-making teams. They're able to really go through that process if they are needing to procure in line with that particular guide and understand each of the initiatives we're hoping to achieve throughout the life cycle. So a couple of the lessons that we learned from this process. So this is not our first office that we've had a lot of sustainability put into, but we have over time learnt that really clear need for non-technical language. So we've really brought down the technical language that we were including in those guides. And there's such an importance of engagement and collaboration. So there was a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussions with team members probably from every single team across the JLL Sydney team who are involved in putting this guide together and making sure it was the most usable moving forward. So probably some concluding thoughts. So this guide has a really important role in maintaining our integrity and certification promises. So we make sure that when we're doing any work in the space that we're doing it kind of in line with our procurement guide. And also it does have a really high value to sustainable operations. I believe we have entirely new operation team members from when we had the design phase. And so, being able to go back to a guide and not necessarily rely on some people just kind of creates a really clear chain of custody. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Mel. That was fascinating and so good to see the level of impact that had. So don't forget, please download the best practice guideline from the BBP. There is a QR code on your screen. There is also a link further back in the chat if you'd like to grab it. But right now, I'd like to invite our panel to come on screen, please. So if you can all turn your cameras on. I'm really excited by the number of questions that are trickling through. Thanks, audience. Keep them coming. We've got, a good 20 minutes for question time now. I have a question to start the panel off with, and then I'm going to jump into the ones in the Q&A. So look out, panel, they're coming your way. But let's start. Simon, I want to start with you if I can, please. Why is now the right time to do this? And what is BBP hearing from industry that makes it the right initiative in 2025?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. Really, right now is the time to do it because 2030 is just around the corner. Reducing scope 1 and 2 emissions is really widely understood. And we're really seeing the results of kind of the interventions addressing those particular scopes. But in order to achieve net zero, it needs to go beyond just eliminating waste and circulate the resources we have. I think, for the longest time, scope 3 emissions were kind of put in that too hard basket. So I think it's really about time that we start focusing on that. In terms of signals that we've been seeing, I think most recently on a local scale, we're seeing in the science-based targets consultation draft, they're really putting a bit more focus on scope 3 emissions and how to measure and report against that. And then locally with the federal government's own environmentally sustainable procurement policy and framework that's kind of come into play. So these really strong signals we're seeing globally and locally. And I think if we shift our focus to collectively reduce our scope 3 emissions, I think there's a lot of opportunity to, reduce emissions, reduce costs, innovate, demonstrate leadership, all the good stuff, and build some resilience into our supply chains.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I love the collaborative aspect of the BBC really trying to build on each other. Harriet, why is the GBCA also taking a particular interest in circular procurement right now? I think this is a huge guide that you've produced. Why the focus?
Yeah. Well, I suppose circular economy is one of the strategic priorities of the GBCA, and we really wanted to make sure that if we were starting to embed it into the Green Star tools, we needed to make sure that we were providing practical guidance to project teams to make sure that we weren't just putting out requirements out into the world and not giving any guidance on how to actually execute it. And so I suppose the guidelines are really there to make sure that people are thinking about and executing circular procurement now, especially because, that we're really going to see the impact in 50 years' time when the buildings that we're building today are potentially going to be coming down. So we really need to make sure that we're procuring with these circular strategies in mind so that it makes things easier in the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Jim, what do you think is the greatest barrier to this guide being as successful as it possibly could be? And what can we do about it? And not just we on the panel, but we as the 100 or so collective people here today.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the frameworks are there. We have the metrics. We know how to measure and quantify circularity. I think the biggest challenge I've seen, as we've gone through various training courses with businesses trying to implement circularity, is really that sense of ownership. So how do we make sure that the right people within our organizations know what the circular economy is and have that as part of their roles, and that they have their own KPIs for delivering circularity within the business? How do we empower them to take this on and actually deliver it? And how do we then engage with our stakeholders, whether those are our suppliers or people we're supplying to, so that they understand and get on board with the way we're delivering circularity? And I think we have all the parts we need. We just have to make sure that the right people feel empowered to actually go ahead and deliver it.
Great. I feel like we're going to unpack that a little bit more soon. Mel, what difficulties has JLL needed to overcome to get the best uptake of your own guide, and how have they been addressed?
So it's probably no secret that JLL is a bit of a beast of a company. We are quite large. So, documentation during handover can be, quite overwhelming. So, having big governance structures around, where we put our documentation, how we're able to access that documentation, and making sure that there is a little bit of a chain of custody with some of our leaders not sitting in Australia either. So indoctrinating our heads of corporate real estate that represent JLL down, as well as the people who are on the ground. In our office in Sydney, there's a really large group of sustainability professionals who sit right next to the people who make those procurement decisions, but that's not necessarily the case for every single one of our offices. So we wanted to keep that in mind because obviously, we do have a big group of real estate around the country. So that governance and chain of custody of documentation was the most important thing for us, just in case there isn't someone you can tap on the shoulder and ask.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. Thank you. We have a whole pile of audience questions coming in. I love it. Please keep them coming. We'll try to keep the answers snappy so we can address as many of them as we can. The first one, and anyone on the panel, please jump in. Is circular economy or circular procurement specific to products, or are there guidelines for procurement of services? How do we tackle the difference?
Happy to take that if you like. Yes, it's an interesting one. So one of the solutions to, or delivery of circular economy is to shift from a product mindset to a service mindset, to servitize products. What we tend to find is that a lot of those services also have products behind them. And so if we're shifting from a physical system to a digital system, that digital system will also rest on hardware and energy and other services that sit around that. So that's partly why shifting the mindset from your own organization to that broader context of the broader system that we're procuring materials from is important, and why it's important to engage with suppliers and to understand their circularity and how your behavior can influence their circular performance and not just your own.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm going to focus on Simon and Mel for the next one. So for circularity in procurement, how do we measure the social benefits? So you've talked about economic and environmental benefits. How are your organisations leaning into the social benefits and how we might measure those?
You want to have a crack first, Mel? Yeah.
Oh, ladies first. Thank you, Simon. So I think, looking at our supplier base and who we are engaging with, we have suppliers that are coming from, vast amount of backgrounds. It could be, suppliers who are supporting environmental needs. It could be suppliers who are supporting social needs like, women in domestic violence, employing people coming back, previously incarcerated people. It really does depend on the type of product or service that you are procuring, but it's really keeping those social impacts front of mind. As sustainability professionals, we've always taken on the champion the cause type of thing. So when we're making procurement decisions, really bringing those to the forefronts of the discussion. We're not just procuring a service. We're not just procuring some paper towel. That can have more of an impact than just the dollar value of that product. So that's, all of us coming together. Nobody wants to do bad things. And if we can do good things, that's always going to be at the front of our conversations.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, Mel just stole all my answers, but I think just building on that, I think, when we're looking for any kind of procurement goals or outcomes, we're looking for co-benefits as well. Like as Mel said, we're not looking at, especially for social impact, I think the financial return is probably not the one that you're looking for, in this case. So look for those other metrics and or ways to kind of tell that narrative of the good that you're putting out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you can just to chip in. I think you can also turn that question on its head and start from trying to understand what sort of social benefits you're trying to influence through your model, and then actively look for the circular initiatives or circular products or services that directly try and influence those metrics. So sometimes it's good to just turn things on their head and try and understand what social benefits you're actually trying to drive through your circular procurement.
It's possibly also worth adding on, it doesn't have to necessarily be procurement at a certain stage of the life cycle. If you haven't been able to achieve any of your social goals that you set out for, you have an entire operation of that space as well, or you've got an entire phase in which you can continually try to do more in the social impact space. So it's always, keeping that front of mind throughout the entire life cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next question, we're going to talk about the business case for circularity. So, we live in a commercial world, like, we all do, and we have to face that. So how do you make the business case for financial benefits from sustainability, or at least maybe the business case for benefits without costs? And are there ways that you do quantify the benefits, and do you have any actual examples of things that you've done?
Again, I'm speaking from a building life cycle perspective as opposed to operational procurement, but there's some great examples within the Practical Guide to Circular Procurement of Midtown Centre was a building in Brisbane, and the speed to market was 35% faster for project delivery and 30% cost savings compared to a new build. So yeah, throughout the guide, there's some really great examples of some financial and time-saving benefits.
Great example. Anyone else? All right, let's do the next one. What are the ways that suppliers can make things as easy as possible for businesses looking to implement circular procurement strategies? Jim, how about we start with you?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, we see this in a variety of different ways. So obviously for products, we're seeing a greater use of circularity metrics directly alongside products. And yeah, certainly through the inclusion in environmental product declarations. It's one of the core purposes behind some of the circularity metrics that we're increasingly using. But I think the critical thing with a lot of circular economy communication is not just having a badge to say how good your product is, but to provide more of a communication over the direction of travel. So, you know, what is your circular economy strategy behind your product? Do you have a clear idea of how circular you are today? Do you have a clear idea of how circular you're trying to become? Do you understand the connections that really link into the circularity of your product? And how do you communicate those clearly? And I guess one of the reasons we have circularity metrics is to try and simplify that communication. Because if we're talking about durability-based modeling, how long things last, how easily they can be remanufactured, can they be disassembled? Do they contain recycled content? Do they feed into biological systems? These are all really different metrics that we're throwing into the mix, and circularity metrics help us to distill those down to a fairly simple, 0 to 100% circular, that we can then communicate different forms of circularity within. So having something that our customers can use to directly compare our circular solution with another one, and to understand how that circularity then impacts on the environmental, economic, and social benefits, and also to see a direction of travel. How are we trying to improve? Where do we see ourselves going in the future? I think is how we would typically try and communicate that.
Mel and Simon, any particular things you really wish suppliers would do which would make circular procurement easier?
Simon, I answered first last time. It's your turn this time.
I would love to see a transparent process of what happens at the end of a product's lifespan. So if there is a kind of, let's say we change the model of purchasing furniture and we are now hiring it or renting it. And at the end of that process, we can send it back to the supplier. I want to know what happens in that process, how it works, when are the time interventions that we need to start talking to the suppliers, and also, what happens with that piece of material at the end of it. On the flip side, I'd also love to see the suppliers also kind of provide a bit of context on the benefits to the everyday user of that space. I think, if you're moving to a new fit out or a new building, there is that expectation of, everything's going to be new and shiny, but maybe there's a bit of work in there to kind of talk about the benefits of retaining those kind of products and materials and benefits there.
I'm going to build on there. I feel like we've spoken a bit about the beginning and end of the life of a product, but what about in the middle? Like if you're looking at procuring a product as a service, or even a furniture that can be maintained, documentation to record if something has been maintained, and also how it's maintained for future users.
Mel, I might actually direct you onto another one. We've got a question. Could you please elaborate JLL's FFE requirements in new fit outs, especially when reuse is not the preferred option by the occupants? I feel like we're leaning into that at the moment.
Yeah, so there's always two ways to approach an outcome. Are you ticking a box, or are you driving an impact or trying to solve a problem? And, that doesn't make you the most popular person in the room when you put that out on the table. But, we've always strived to make an impact. And even wearing my old consultancy hat, all of our clients have also come into these spaces wanting to make an impact. So there's been processes of decision making, really, really simple, like decision trees around, can we reuse or can we source something that's reused? Can we use really highly recycled content of something? Have we got EPDs looking around the life cycle impact of those products, third-party certifications, but digging into some of the third-party certifications and what those actually require of those products. So not necessarily just ticking a box because it has any third-party certification associated with it. And then, as Simon mentioned, you're always sometimes going to have to buy new things. You know, it would be remiss to not include leasing requirements and make good and things in this conversation, that sometimes it's not an option for you to be able to reuse from a previous space. So making the best decision that you can at the time, but inevitably, until we're in a world where circularity is, you know, everyday language, there is always going to potentially be products that are coming into your space that are not a reused or recycled content product. But, you know, improving every time is what we strive for.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, open question for the group. Among sustainability and procurement teams, the alignment of goals is clear, but I find it can be challenging bringing others on the journey. This has been touched on a bit as far as collaboration and engagement goes, but what's your advice for demonstrating meaningful change and encouraging other stakeholders to see the value, especially when we're looking at long-term gains? Nice thoughts on that one.
I'll have a crack. So I think really spending the time to understand your supply chain and looking for those kind of key impact areas that mean what to your business or organization or your fit out, and maybe start the conversation there with all the relevant stakeholders, because I can guarantee you'll probably think of one or two people, but there's probably about 5 or 6 other people that are directly or indirectly associated with that impact. So I think the collaboration does take time, but I think that is where I would start looking.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think from the guide's perspective, yeah, and this aligns with ISO 59010 as well, in terms of understanding the alignment of your circularity and sustainability goals with broader business strategy. Yeah, we always, guide starts from understanding what you're trying to achieve as a business through the implementation of circular procurement. Because circularity in itself is not often the goal that we're trying to achieve. It's usually the environmental, social, or economic benefits. And by understanding and aligning our circular procurement directly with other business objectives, it makes it more relevant to those other people within the business who have the delivery of those objectives as part of their KPIs. So, taking the conversation outside of sustainability or circularity to those broader business objectives is part of that process. We've seen that with clients who quite often translate sustainability and circularity goals into the context of business risk, for example. Everybody within a business has the management of risk as part of their job profile. If you can talk about the delivery of sustainability objectives through the lens of risk, then it suddenly becomes a lot more relevant and people are much more eager to come on board.
Yeah, very true. All right, we've still got questions we haven't got to, but really I just wanted to sum up with a quick round of what is your biggest takeaway from this webinar, but even beyond that into circular procurement? What's the one thing that you really want our audience to leave here remembering today? Harriet, could we start with you?
Yeah. I think there's a level of openness and curiosity that has to be taken on board when you're approaching circularity and circular procurement. And that really ensures that people, as we've spoken to during this webinar, sharing information, collaborating with people that they might not have necessarily collaborated with before, and extending that throughout the whole of the project's life cycle.
Absolutely. Simon?
My takeaway is, besides the collaboration, having conversations with people, just be mindful of the timing and scheduling. These things do take time. So I guess be patient, not complacent, but you'll get there, I think.
Excellent. Mel?
So if you're overwhelmed and you don't necessarily have a big support base for, wanting to start your journey, pick something small, something in your realm of influence. We don't say that small things make big changes for no reason. Really just pick something small, and all of those collectives will make an impact and people will want to come on that journey with you.
Right. And Jim?
Yeah, similar to Mel, it's a question of adopting that continuous improvement mindset and getting started. We don't have to boil the ocean. We have to find things that work, be prepared to fail quickly and try things out. But that engagement and collaboration is key to that. But get started and adopt that continuous improvement mindset, and start to communicate where you're trying to get to.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for that. I might like to invite Samara Booth to pop her camera on. Samara is the powerhouse BBP coordinator at the City of Sydney. She sits in the background behind all the great work that the BBP does, and the BBP just would not be what it is without her. So thank you, Samara, for the work that you do that underpins all of these great publications that the BBP brings out. That is harder to say than you think.
It's a mouthful some days. Thanks, Nicole. That's very generous of you. And thanks to all the panelists. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time and coming along to listen to this webinar and hear our panelists and our guest speakers talk about their case studies. And please jump onto the Better Buildings Partnership website, betterbuildingspartnership.com.au. Download the guideline. There's also lots of other great tools and resources that can help you on your sustainability journey. And if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any one of us or through the contact us on the BBP website.
Thank you very much, Samara. And thank you to everyone for joining us. It's a really exciting time, and I can't wait to see the impact that this guideline will have as it emerges out across industry and helps us all to become more circular. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
We have many more webinar replays on a whole host of sustainability topics. You can check them out on our website and our YouTube channel.